There is a door you walk through hundreds of times a day. Most of the time, you don't even notice it's there. Someone triggers you, you get bad news, you feel anxious, you want to quit something, an old habit starts pulling at you, and suddenly, there it is. A tiny opening between what is happening and what you do next. And that's your choice. And I think we dramatically underestimate how powerful that moment is. Because every time that door appears, even for a second, another possibility exists on the other side of it. A different response, a different action, sometimes even a different direction for your life. And today I want to show you how to start seeing these doors. Because once you can see them, you can start walking through them. Okay, let's talk about that part of our life that are still truly ours, okay? There's not much left, it seems, but let's talk about this, okay? So there are so many things we don't get to choose, right? You don't choose everything that happens to you. You don't choose what other people say or do. You don't choose every thought that enters your mind. You don't choose every emotion that moves through your body. You don't choose your past. You don't choose every obstacle. And you certainly don't control every outcome. But hidden inside all of that uncertainty is something extraordinary. There's still a part that belongs to all of us, okay? And that question that sounds like, what now? What do I do with this? How do I respond? Where do I go from here? That is where choice lives. And that little question of what now can become a door. And that is what we still own, okay? That choice. So hear me out. Here's why I think choice is almost magical. Two versions, let's say, of what happens next can exist on opposite sides of a single decision, right? You can send a text or put that phone down. You can stay silent or speak. You can quit or give it one more try. You can spend the next 3 hours attacking yourself for making a mistake, or you can say, okay, that happened. What is my next choice? You can repeat something you've done 1,000 times before, or perhaps for the first time, do something different. And none of that sounds particularly magical. I get it. It's just a text or a conversation, a walk or an apology, a boundary, or starting again. But let's zoom out, okay? One choice influences the next, and the next influences another. Repeated choices become patterns, patterns shape habits, habits shape the way you move through the world. And eventually, those seemingly insignificant moments begin influencing your relationships, your work, your health, your opportunities, your life. And what looked like one tiny little door may have actually been an entrance into a different direction. That is the magic of choice, okay? Not that you can choose anything you want and magically control that outcome. Of course, you can't, right? The magic is that even when you cannot choose what happens, you can often still participate in what happens next or how at least you approach something. And that is enormous. And this is what the Oiaré Core has really been building toward. If you've been following this core series, we've been building towards this, okay? So first, we talked about architecture, which are your beliefs, conditioning, emotional patterns, habits, assumptions, and the meaning you assign to what happens to you, okay? Your architecture helps explain why you experience situations the way you do. Then there's elevation, which is your emotional and physiological state, because where you are internally changes what you can see. Then there's inner compass, and which is the qualities and values that answer the question of who am I practicing becoming? And now we have choice. Because you can understand your architecture, you can change your elevation, you can know exactly who you're practicing becoming, but eventually life puts something in front of you, right? And there comes a moment when you have to decide what now. And choices where everything else becomes lived. The problem is these doors often appear and disappear so quickly that we don't experience them as choices. Something happens and we react. Someone criticizes you, you defend. Something feels uncomfortable, we avoid. Someone disappoints you, we shut down. You make a mistake, you might attack yourself. You feel insecure, you seek reassurance. You feel overwhelmed, you procrastinate. And it happens so quickly that it doesn't feel like you've made a choice, right? It feels like that's just what happened. And this is part of what we talked about in architecture, right? So your brain learns patterns, and patterns are super efficient. And some of those patterns are just incredibly useful, right? Others may have protected you once, but you no longer need them. And some have simply been practiced so many times that they have become so familiar. And something happens, right? Your brain recognizes something familiar, your body responds, a familiar thought appears, a familiar behavior follows. Trigger, pattern, reaction. And sometimes the whole thing happens before you even realize you are standing in front of a door. But there's something fascinating about this door. It only exists in one place, now. Okay? Not yesterday. You can think about yesterday, learn from yesterday, regret yesterday, but you cannot choose yesterday, nor tomorrow. You can plan for tomorrow, worry about tomorrow, imagine 100 versions of tomorrow, but you cannot make tomorrow's choice yet. The only place you can actually choose is here, this moment. And this is where some of the ideas that have influenced me most really come together. Okay, Eckhart Tolle, he's written extensively about the power of the present moment. Michael Singer talks about observing the activity of the mind rather than automatically getting carried away by everything it produces. And Ram Dass, okay, he gave us the beautiful, simple reminder, be here now. 3 words, but think about what they make possible. Be here now. Not 5 years ago, not 10 steps into a future that hasn't happened, not completely buried inside the story your mind is creating about the moment. Here, now. Because when you become present enough to notice what is happening, something changes. Something happens, your mind reacts, an emotion rises, your architecture begins telling its familiar story. Fear might say run, shame might say hide. An old pattern says this is what we always do. But then you notice, I'm getting defensive right now, or I'm spiraling, or I'm about to do that thing again. And that moment of noticing is incredibly important, because now you have an opportunity for a more deliberate response. Ram Dass, Eckhart Tolle, Michael Singer have approached this through presence and awareness. Psychology gives us concepts like metacognition and self-regulation. And neuroscience helps us understand some of the brain processes involved in cognitive control and our ability to interrupt automatic responses, right? They approach it from very different places, but there's a powerful idea connecting them all. When you become aware of what is happening within you, you have a greater opportunity to influence what happens next. And that brings us to something incredibly important: agency. Agency is our capacity to participate in what happens next. I may not control what just happened. I may not control the first thought that entered my mind. I may not control the emotion that showed up in my body, and I certainly don't control what another person does. But I am not completely powerless inside this moment. Something is still mine, and that is agency. And choice is one of the ways we exercise it. I think about it like this: choice is the door, agency is the capacity to walk through it. And our inner compass helps us decide which direction to walk. Sometimes agency is enormous. You can leave, you can begin, you can speak, you can change direction. And sometimes agency can be tiny, right? I can take one breath before I answer. I can wait 10 minutes before sending this. I can ask a question instead of assuming. Or I can let this feeling exist without immediately acting on it. Or even, I can apologize, I can begin again. Sometimes that door barely cracks open, right? But it's still a door. And this is the moment I want us to stop treating as ordinary, because I think it's really extraordinary. Your whole past can arrive here with you at that door, okay? All your conditioning, your experiences, your fears, your habits, your old beliefs, your emotional patterns, your architecture, all of it can be pulled on you from behind. You have it on your back, okay? And in front of you is your future. Not a future you can completely control, but a future that hasn't fully happened yet. And right in the middle is now. You here, okay? And the door. Your past may explain why you want to respond a certain way, but it does not always have to completely decide what happens next. Think about just how incredible that is. A pattern may be 20 years old. The fear may be 20 years old, okay? The belief may be 20 years old, but this moment has never happened before. And neither has the choice you're about to make inside of it. The past is, present through your architecture. The future exists as a possibility, and you are standing at the threshold. And this is the magic moment. Okay? Be here now doesn't mean feel good now. And I want to make an important distinction here. Being present does not mean suddenly becoming peaceful and Zen, Buddha on a mountaintop, okay? Choice does not mean choosing every thought or feeling that appears. Sometimes you are present and still scared. You might be present and angry, present and grieving, present and overwhelmed. The practice isn't make this feeling disappear. It's, can I be here while this is happening? Can I notice fear without immediately handling fear the steering wheel? Can I notice anger without letting anger write the next sentence or send that text? Can I notice shame without letting shame decide who I am? Can I notice an old pattern and say, I see what's happening? And then ask, what now? Okay, that question returns you to the present. And the present is where choice lives. And there's something very real happening here too. Our brains are built to automate. And thank goodness they are. Imagine having to consciously deliberate on every familiar task and every movement you make. We learn patterns because patterns make life more efficient. But we can also learn patterns that no longer serve us. And at the same time, our brains have systems involved in cognitive control. They help us hold goals in mind, reconsider interpretations, inhibit certain automatic responses, and choose behaviors based on more than the first impulse that appears. Psychology also gives us the concept of metacognition, like I said before, and in simpler terms, that's really becoming aware of our own thinking. So thinking about thinking. So instead of only being inside the thought, we can notice that thought. Okay? Instead of everyone thinks I'm incompetent, that can be I'm having the thought that everyone thinks I'm incompetent. That tiny shift creates some distance. And inside the distance, there may be another door. And there's another person whose work belongs in this conversation, in my opinion. Psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl wrote profoundly, right, about the inner freedom that can remain even under circumstances a person would never choose. And his story makes an important distinction very clear. Choice is not control. Sometimes circumstances like his are just horrific, right? Sometimes options are painfully limited. Sometimes there's no good choice available. So when I talk about the power of choice, I never, want us to say that, we can control life through it. You don't. We're asking a different question. Within the reality I have been given, what is still mine? What can I influence? How can I respond? What can I do now? And maybe today that space is enormous. Maybe today it's tiny. But look for it, because somewhere inside that space, there may be a door. Now, awareness helps you see that door. Agency means you have some capacity to move. but there's still a question. Which direction do I go, right? And that's why inner compass comes before choice in the Oiaré model. Your inner compass answers, who am I practicing becoming? Maybe you choose being courageous or compassionate, curious, disciplined, patient, honest, self-respecting. And those words have a job because you're standing at a door and there's one question I want you to begin asking in these moments. Given these circumstances, how would that person I'm practicing becoming respond? Not what will make this feeling disappear faster, but what does my fear want me to do? Not what will make everyone happy with me, okay? Not what would I normally do, but given these circumstances, how would the person I'm practicing becoming respond? Now everything starts coming together here, okay? Your inner compass gives you direction, your agency gives you the capacity to move, and choice is the step. You don't have to feel like that person yet, okay? And this is one of my favorite things about choice. You don't have to feel courageous before choosing courage. You don't have to feel confident before speaking. You don't have to feel motivated before beginning. You don't have to feel calm before deciding not to send, I don't know, an angry email. You don't have to feel disciplined before making one disciplined choice. We often wait for our internal world to change before we give ourselves permission to act differently. When I'm confident, I'll do this. When I'm motivated, I'll start my workout. When I'm not scared anymore, I'll take that chance. But sometimes choice says, we can go now. Fear can come. Doubt can come. Uncertainty can come. You don't have to eliminate everything uncomfortable before walking through that door. And here's another beautiful part of this. Your brain isn't static. It changes through experience. That's neuroplasticity, right? So when you repeatedly respond differently, you're not just making isolated decisions, you're practicing a pattern. And imagine you've spent years responding to criticism by immediately becoming defensive, right? So criticism, defend, criticism, defend, criticism, defend. That path is incredibly familiar. Then one day, criticism, you feel defensiveness, you notice it, you pause, you breathe, and instead immediately defending yourself, you become curious. Maybe you ask, is there anything useful here for me? Or that's a new response, right? And it may feel incredibly unnatural. And of course it will be, because the old response has years of practice and the new one has 30 seconds. But then another door appears and you practice that again and another and again. And over time, repeated experiences can help strengthen new patterns of responding. And this is where something fascinating happens within the Oiaré model. Choice begins feeding back into architecture. Architecture influences choice. But repeated choices can also help shape the patterns that become part of your architecture. The model loops back around. You are not only discovering what has shaped you, you are participating in what shapes you next. And this brings me to one of the most important principles in Oiaré. The victory is the choice, okay, not the outcome. Because every time you make a choice that the person you choose to be would make, you're directly that person in that moment, okay? And it's important to keep in mind that most of these doors won't look dramatic, okay? They'll look like normal days, normal Wednesdays. You might get out of bed and work out, or you snooze again. You pick up the phone or stay present. You join the gossip at work or you don't. You defend yourself immediately or listen. You might keep scrolling or go back or go to sleep at night. Hide the mistake or own it. Avoid the difficult task or give it 10 more minutes. Say yes automatically or give yourself time to decide. These moments look tiny, but they're everywhere. And when you begin looking for choice, ordinary life starts looking different because suddenly you see opportunities everywhere to practice become, right? Here's a door, another door, door, all day long. So how do we actually use all of this when life happens? Okay. I recommend remembering 4 words: elevate, observe, return, choose. First, elevate. If you're deep in a valley, help your nervous system first. Breathe, walk, move, step outside. Give yourself enough space to see beyond the immediate reaction. Then you observe. What is my architecture doing right now? What story am I telling? What am I assuming? What old patterns have been activated? Okay? And then you return. Come back to your inner compass and ask yourself, who am I practicing becoming? And finally, you choose. Okay, given these circumstances, how would the person I'm becoming respond? Then make the smallest choice available in that direction. Not the perfect choice, not the choice that guarantees the perfect outcome, just the next one. And now, we really talked about all 4 parts of the Oiaré Core, right? Architecture, elevation, inner compass, choice. But really, this isn't really the end, right? This is where the practice begins. Because tomorrow, life is going to happen. Someone will annoy you. Someone won't go, won't do what they said they would, or something won't go according to plan. You might get tired. You might feel afraid. You'll be tempted to fall back into something unfamiliar. And somewhere inside one of those moments, there will be a door. Maybe this time you'll see it. You'll pause and you'll be here now. And you recognize what your architecture is doing. And you change your elevation if you need to. And you return to your inner compass. And instead of asking, what do I normally do here? You'll ask, given these circumstances, how would the person I'm becoming respond? And then you choose. Okay? And maybe nobody else will notice, most likely not. And maybe from the outside it will look completely insignificant. But you will know, because for one moment, your past did not automatically decide what happened next. You participated in that decision. And then another door will appear, and another, and another. And that's the magic of choice. Not controlling the future, not escaping difficult emotion, not becoming someone who always gets it right. But it's recognizing that right here in this present moment, there's often something that is still yours. A response, a direction, a next step, a choice. So be here now. See that door. Remember your direction and walk through it again and again and again. Because a life isn't built in one giant decision. It's built in these tiny moments. And this one, okay, and this one, and this one, okay? So remember, keep looking for those doors and live by direction, not by reaction.